The following series of videos present a brief case study of one of our clients' journey with Spirit Energy, from the point of inquiry to the handover at the end of the installation. It showcases a few of the things that we take into account when designing a solar and battery system, from looking at how the solar bypass diodes will contribute to shade mitigation, to having someone dedicated to negotiating with your local DNO to ensure that you get the best offer, as that's essential to the economics of your project. The following case study also shows the level that our project managers go to in order to ensure an efficient and safe installation that runs without hiccups, as well as the attention to detail, experience and professionalism of the technical and structural survey that is done by our head of installations for every project that Spirit Energy works on. Finally, it shows the quality, efficiency and pride that our fully in-house team of installers put into every system that they install. Our roofers and electricians are not subcontracted, and most of them have been with the company installing solar and battery for over 5 years. This case study is a great example of what you get when you choose a local family business to install your solar system. We've been installing solar PV in and around Reading since 2010, and our team has over 150 years of combined experience in the industry. When you request a quote from Spirit, all this experience is being channeled into designing the best system for your property, and we do it all for free with no upfront cost. Our livelihoods depend on our ability to provide a first-class solar and battery design and installation service. Of course, we don't always get it right, and we're always learning and trying to improve, so we welcome any feedback that you may have. In the case of any problems after installation, our head of installations, Justin, goes back to site personally to fix any issues, and we also have a technical support department that is on call to help if anything goes wrong with your system, whether it's in warranty or not. Now, I want to stress that this was not a premium service that this customer, Sam, paid extra for. This is just a condensed standard case study that shows the caliber of design and technical work that gets put into every single system that Spirit Energy works on, whether you're looking for a small battery-only installation or a massive commercial solar system to power your warehouse. There are also sample downloads available on the website where you can download an example quotation to see the actual material that we'll provide you with after you've requested a quote. So onto the video series. This is what you get when you request a quote and sign up with Spirit Energy. Sam came to Spirit Energy via referral, looking for advice on the best solar PV and battery storage system for his particular circumstances. When you request a quote from Spirit Energy, you'll immediately be assigned a technical expert who will be your point of contact from start to finish. In the case of Sam, I took his inquiry on, and we started by discussing why he's looking to get solar and battery so that I could design the right system for his needs. The main motivation for him was to go more green, reduce his carbon footprint, and help the environment. He also wanted to protect himself against rising electricity prices and the power cuts that occasionally happen in his area. Following the conversation, it was time for me to start designing the system. In order to get precise measurements of a roof from the office, we can often go online to the website of a client's local planning office and look at any planning applications related to the building, which usually contain architectural drawings of the roof elevations. As a general rule, any planning applications submitted since 1998 are stored online and are publicly available, which is very helpful for accurately measuring up a roof and getting an idea of the layout of a building. If there aren't any plans that we can find, then we use the satellite image on Google Earth, which in my experience is accurate to within 30 centimeters. In Sam's case, we found the architectural drawings online and were able to create an accurate model of the roof from those plans. Sam has a big west-facing roof which we opted to put panels on. His east road-facing roof would also have been good for solar generation. However, he didn't want to put panels on the front of the house in order to preserve the look. The west face also made a lot more sense for him, as the majority of his electricity consumption happens in the late afternoon through the evening. So the west face would allow him to generate at a time when he could use most of it in the house. We decided to use JA 440 watt all black bifacial panels for Sam's system, as they look sleek and are very cost effective and come with a good warranty. The bifacial aspect does also help, as you can capture light rays bouncing around the back of the panel, although in Sam's case he later decided to add on solar skirt bird protection, which means that the underside of the panel won't contribute too much to the overall generation. We originally started with an 18 panel layout, which had a gap in the middle as there are 4 roof vents. As the design progressed, we ran the numbers and showed that it was cost effective for him to move those vents to another part of the roof in order to fit 4 more panels in and bring the total panel count up to 22 panels. The savings that the 4 panels should make will pay for the roof works required to move the vents. We decided to orient the panels in portrait, even though we could actually fit the same number of panels in a landscape layout. There were a few reasons for this. Portrait is cheaper and the array did look a bit neater as well, but the main reason was to do with shade mitigation. In Sam's case, the portrait panels will be less affected by shade as a result of the half cell technology and the bypass diodes that come built into the panels. Watch the videos on simulating and mitigating the shade that come later on in the series to find out more about this, as well as how we worked out that end-phase microinverters wouldn't be cost effective for Sam. So after sending over an initial design and quotation to Sam, we decided to arrange a site survey to go into further detail and firm up the quotation. After sending Sam an initial quotation and design, I popped round to his house to do a site survey and discuss everything with him in person. In order to quote accurately, we do like to do a site survey at some point before finalising the quote. This survey isn't essential, so you don't have to have one if you don't want one, and our head of installations will always do a full technical and structural survey later down the line. He's done one for pretty much every project that Spirit Energy has ever worked on. You can watch the video on the technical survey that comes later on in this series if you'd like to learn more about that. On the site survey, we always make sure to take measurements of the roof, both externally and internally in the loft. We also like to have a look at the meter cupboard and the incoming supply, as well as your consumer unit, which will need to be fully RCD protected if you're getting power cut protection with battery storage. One of the main points of discussion on the survey was the cable run, which was very important for Sam as he wanted to preserve the look of the house. As we were going with the Tesla Powerwall 3, we needed to run the DC cables from the solar on the roof back to the Powerwall, which was going to be installed just outside the garage door. In order to keep the cable run as neat as possible, we decided to run them down the side alley of the house in a white trunking to match the paint on the wall. The DC cables then ran neatly along the brickwork and into the garage, where they ran along the roof and out the other end into the Powerwall 3's hybrid inverter. You can watch our battery installation video that comes later on in this series to see how the DC runs turned out. Another thing that we discussed on the site visit was bird protection. Now, it's hard to know whether you actually need this or not until the system is actually installed. I've seen some solar systems, like the one on my parents' roof, that never have any issues with birds, and I've seen other systems that just get decimated by them. Nowadays, you can usually take a look up and down the street and look at someone else's solar system and see if they're having issues with birds. Unfortunately, we couldn't see any solar PV on Sam's neighbouring roofs, and he didn't want to take the risk of having pigeons scratching around under the panels, so we decided that it would be best to install bird protection. If you are going to get bird protection, then it's best to install it while the scaffolding is up and the roofers are already on site. We offer 2 types of bird protection, a black wire mesh and a product called Solar Skirt. The Solar Skirt looks much nicer and adds a nice finish to the system, but it does come with a more premium price tag because the kit cost is higher and it does take longer to install. In the end, Sam did go for the Solar Skirt, which ended up looking really great on his roof and added a really nice finish to the system. We also discussed the shading that would be caused by the chimney, and how we might go about mitigating that using our advanced shade modelling. On the site visit, we discussed the one major downside to Sam's west-facing roof, which is that there's a large chimney which will cause shading to the system. Now, we wanted to model how much of an impact this chimney would have, and whether it would be worth installing a system with microinverters or power optimizers to help combat the shading. Now, all of Spirit Energy's financial and generational modelling is done using our own custom-built software, which allows us to have full control over it and keep it as accurate and up-to-date as possible. However, in order to do the shade modelling, we loaded up a widely used program called PVSol. Every good solar installer should have an advanced piece of software that allows for complex modelling, like PV-Sol. We use it for a lot of our residential and commercial projects, and it comes with a wide range of benefits. You can run a full shade analysis, as well as some very detailed performance models. Using PV-Sol, you can accurately model for any major electrical loads at the property, such as electric vehicles, heat pumps and swimming pools. And you can also model things like inverter clipping, cable losses, bypass diode shade mitigation, and voltage drops, and even the generation increase from the reflection on the back of any bifacial panels. The modelling is also very detailed, and the software runs a simulation to show the shading for every single minute of the year. You can also model for shading from trees, which was very useful for Sam's project because, as well as a big chimney, Sam also has a large deciduous tree in his garden which could potentially cause shading in the winter months when the sun is lower in the sky. In PV-Sol, I inputted the type of tree, which is relevant because the program even models for deciduous trees dropping their leaves in winter. And I also inputted the shape and rough dimensions of the tree as well. The PV-Sol showed that the tree will have a very negligible impact as it's not quite tall enough to cast a shadow onto the system. The PV-Sol software also shows us a heat map of the panels that will be most affected by shade, so that we can optimize the stringing and make sure to put the panels that will be affected by shade on their own string so that they don't drag down the rest of the system. Now, firstly, we wanted to find out whether it was better to orient the panels in portrait or landscape. Usually the choice is clear because you'll probably be able to get a lot more panels in one orientation than another. However, Sam's roof can fit 22 panels in portrait and 22 panels in landscape. So we ran a model to see which would do a better job of mitigating shade. The results showed that in landscape, the array would have an annual yield reduction due to shading of 8.5%. However, in portrait, it would only be 7.6%. The reason for this is to do with the half-cell technology and the bypass diodes that are built into the panels. We go into more detail on how we take advantage of this to maximize shade mitigation in the next video in this series. The modeling showed that when the system was installed with a standard string inverter, the chimney and tree would cause an annual yield reduction due to shading of around 7.6%. When we reran the model with N-phase microinverters, it showed that the yield reduction due to shading would be reduced to only 5.3% per year. As you may have seen in the previous video, our modelling showed that Sam's 22 panel layout in portrait would have an annual yield reduction due to shading of 7.6% because of the chimney. Firstly, we wanted to see if an optimizer or microinverter system could help mitigate this. When we reran the PV-Sol modelling with N-phase microinverters, it showed that the annual yield reduction due to shading would be reduced to only 5.3% per year, down from 7.6%. So then it came down to the cost benefit of the N-phase system. In Sam's case, the microinverters would come with a price uplift of £2,210. The 2.3% increase in annual generation as a result of these microinverters would work out to save him only an additional £1,521 over the 25-year lifespan of the system, meaning that we advised him against installing them. Systems that use microinverters or optimizers also have far more points of failure than a standard string inverter, which is another reason that we often caution against them. Instead, we opted to use the revolutionary hybrid inverter with 3 MPPTs that is built into the Tesla Powerwall 3. This helps with the shade mitigation as we can put the panels that will be most affected by the chimney on their own MPPT so that they don't drag down the rest of the panels that are unshaded. The PV-Sol software showed us a heat map of the panels that would be most affected so that we could string the 3 Powerwall MPPTs accordingly. Another way that we optimized the system to handle shading was by taking the orientation of the panels into account. As you may have seen in the previous video, we ran a shade simulation to see whether portrait panels would mitigate shade better than landscape. The landscapes would have a yield reduction due to shading of 8.5%, whereas with portrait it was only 7.6%. The reason for the better performance of the portrait panels is that the portrait orientation takes advantage of the half-cell technology of modern panels, where the top half and the bottom half are wired in parallel to each other. This allows the two halves of the panel to operate independently of each other in certain shade conditions. In addition to this, modern solar panels all have 3 bypass diodes which are wired in parallel with the substrings of cells within the panel and split the panels up into thirds vertically, as you can see on the screen now. The bypass diodes allow for each third of the panel to be bypassed if heavily shaded. As the shade moves across the system, both of these features can be utilized by the inverter's MPP tracking to extract the maximum amount of generation from the system and help to mitigate shading. So in Sam's case, as the chimney caused the shade to move from left to right across the system, the panel's bypass diodes and half cell technology will be helping to mitigate the shade and maximize performance. In a lot of our design work, it makes sense to take the bypass diode layout within the panel into account in order to optimize for shade mitigation. It's important to pick a solar installer that understands the technology at this level, as that will have a direct impact on your system's generation and economic benefits. Sam was interested in looking at a battery storage system that would complement his solar PV. He originally wanted to get the Tesla Powerwall 2. However, partway through designing his system, Tesla released Powerwall 3 in the UK. And after installing the very first Powerwall 3 in the country, we were keen to recommend it to him. Sam was wondering whether he might need 2 Powerwall 3 units, as his annual electricity usage is quite high. The economics of a battery system rely on you using as much of your storage capacity as possible every day. The more of the storage capacity that you're taking advantage of, the better the economic case for the battery system. For a second Powerwall 3 to be justifiable economically, you'd ideally need to be fully utilising the additional 13.5 kilowatt hours of storage every day to offset your daytime electricity, which means you'd need to be regularly using 27 kilowatt hours in the house during the daytime window of your electricity tariff. You can also save money with batteries by using them to export during peak windows, like with Octopus Flux. However, the savings aren't going to be as good as they will be if you use the stored energy to power your house. We have developed our own half-hourly battery model that we use to estimate the savings from different battery systems. For Sam, the model showed that one Powerwall would be fully cycled at least once a day, which means it will pay for itself well within its warranty period. When we ran the model for 2 Powerwalls, the savings from the additional 13.5 kilowatt hours of the second Powerwall were not enough to justify the cost. So we suggested that he install 1 Powerwall with the solar and then monitor the performance of the system for 6 months, then maybe look at a Tesla DC expansion pack if the data suggests it's economically sensible. Now, how much battery storage you need does also depend on your use case for the battery. Some of our customers install battery storage so that they can take the house off grid, in which case more battery storage is often better because it'll keep the house running for longer. Part of the reason that Sam is getting solar and battery is to live more independently of the grid, and Powerwall 3 will help him to do this in a few different ways. Firstly, it allows him to store excess solar generation for use in the house. With the battery, 83% of his solar generation is expected to be used in the house. If he didn't have the battery, then only 32% of it would be used in the house. Another way that Powerwall 3 helps with grid independency is its ability to keep the whole house running in a power cut. It can also keep both the DC coupled solar and up to 7 kilowatts of AC coupled solar running in a power cut as well. Sam's solar PV system will be shaded by a chimney stack, resulting in an annual yield reduction of 7.6%. As I mentioned earlier on in the series, the Powerwall 3 has 3 MPPTs, which will also help with mitigating shade from the chimney. On the screen now, you can see the optimal string design for the Powerwall 3 that we worked out using the PV Sol software. We also discussed the best tariff for Sam to move on to following the installation, and ultimately settled on Intelligent Octopus Flux, as that would optimize his savings the most and integrate with Powerwall 3 via the Octopus API. The best place to put the battery is next to the incoming supply and consume unit, especially if the battery is going to provide power cut protection to the house. We've seen some installers recommend putting batteries in the loft. However, we would never do this because of how hot lofts can get in the summer and the increased fire risk that comes along with that. Some battery manufacturers, including Tesla, won't provide a warranty unless the battery is installed on the ground floor. Sam's Powerwall is going to be installed next to the garage door, which is ideal as it means that the cable runs are very short and it also looks great on the front of his house. If you'd like to find out about the battery installation, watch the Powerwall 3 install video that comes later on in this series. We found that our clients like to look at all different types of financial indicators when making a decision about whether to get solar and battery. So we've created a document that gives them the data in whatever format they like to consume it, whether that be internal rate of return or net present value, first year savings or payback period. We also provide a full cash flow table so that you can follow our modelling and take a detailed look yourself. The return of a solar system depends greatly on electricity price inflation, so we also provide a table to show how the returns will be affected by different rates of electricity inflation. As well as financial models, we also provide detailed generational and usage models to show how the solar generation will be used in the house, as well as how the battery will perform. We provide breakdowns of where the returns will come from, whether that be from offsetting the house's electricity bill, or profiting from excess solar, or even from off-peak charging. We also provide a seasonal breakdown to show how the system will perform in different parts of the year, and how grid independent you'll be in each season. There's also a page which includes some facts about the carbon savings of your personal system. Sam's 9.68 kilowatt peak solar system with the Tesla Powerwall 3 is expected to generate 7,320 kilowatt hours per year. It would be slightly higher if not for the shading losses of 7.6%. We've modelled that, with the Powerwall 3 storing excess solar generation, 83% of his solar generation will be used in the house. He'll also be over 52% grid independent on average over the course of the year, and over 93% grid independent on average during a summer day. Sam's system is expected to return over £1,800 in the first year, most of it coming from offsetting his on-site usage, but also from exporting to the grid using Intelligent Octopus Flux. In the first year, Sam's system will offset an estimated 996 kilos of carbon. That's looking at the carbon intensity of the grid versus the carbon intensity of solar and working out the difference. Over the lifetime of the system, it's estimated that he'll offset 292 flights from London to New York. That's the equivalent of planting 690 trees. A few days after the installation was complete, we had a look at the monitoring in his Tesla app, and it showed that 96% of his electricity is coming from solar generation, whether it's either used immediately or stored on site in the battery. Upon finalising Sam's system design, it was time for me to hand the project over to one of our project managers, Sarah. Our project managers are highly trained and very experienced. They specialise in taking a project from the point of sale to getting the installation arranged, completed and commissioned. We take care of absolutely everything, and we don't subcontract the project management. So there's a lot of back-end work to getting a high-quality solar and battery system fitted efficiently and safely. I'm going to talk about some of those steps now in the context of Sam's installation. The first thing that we always do is to submit the DNO application, which in Sam's case was a G99 application for a solar and battery storage system above 3.68 kilowatts per phase to Scottish and Southern electricity networks. After agreeing on a final system design, it's important to get this sent off immediately to your local DNO in order to not delay the installation. DNO applications can take up to 11 weeks to be completed, depending on demand. We were very fortunate that Sam's came back in only a couple of weeks. The amount of generation and export that you're permitted by the DNO is essential to the economics and financial return of the project. It's so important that we actually have someone in the office whose job is to deal with the DNOs and negotiate the maximum amount of generation and export for our clients. While waiting for the DNO application to come back, Sarah started ticking off the rest of the project management tasks that needed to be done prior to installation. An important part of preparing for the installation, which we do for every job that we work on, is to send our head of installations, Justin Parsons, round to the client's house to do a full technical and structural survey. Please watch the separate video to find out more about what happens on the technical survey and what Justin looks at. Part of the technical survey involves Justin taking measurements for the structural report. In Sam's case, Sarah then inputted these measurements into the software that comes with the K2 mounting system that we use for pitch roof installations. This software determines the bracket layout that the roofers later follow when installing the mounting system. This is very important, and it has to be done properly because it's holding the solar system to the roof. When designing a solar panel mounting system, Our project managers need to look at the weight that the system will add to the roof in the worst case scenario, which is usually when there's snow on top of the panels. They also need to look at what happens when there's a strong wind blowing, because the solar panels can start to act like a big sail. If the bracket layout isn't perfect, or the brackets aren't fitted to the roof properly, then the panels could potentially fly off the roof in a strong wind. The modelling determined that Sam's system needed 50 brackets, arranged in the layout that you can see on screen now, to fix it securely to the roof and spread the weight of the system out. The software also runs all of the structural loading calculations that our third-party structural engineering company needs in order to certify that the roof can take the weight of the system without requiring any strengthening. A lot of solar installers don't do structural surveys, or they advise the customer to get their own one done. However, we just don't like taking that risk with your roof. It's also the project manager's job to prepare the method statement and job sheet for the project, as well as to prepare the official health and safety risk assessments prior to installation. We take health and safety extremely seriously at Spirit Energy, and the risk assessments and method statements are site-specific to every job. Justin also does a risk assessment on the technical survey and relays all of the information to the project managers to make sure that our installers are safe on the day of the install. An example of something that is relevant for some projects and not others would be checking to see if there are any overhead power lines that come near to the property. If there are any overhead power lines, then they'll need to be sheathed prior to the installation. We adhere to all the CDM regulations, which includes us creating a construction phase plan for every job that we're the main contractor for. The project manager also has to prepare a bill of materials so that our purchasing department can buy the correct kit in time for the planned installation date. In Sam's case, as it was one of the first Powerwall 3 installations in the country, it was flown over from America to our warehouse in Reading. The project managers also have to arrange for scaffolding to be put up and taken down. Sam's scaffolding went up very quickly and efficiently. For the majority of our installations, we use a trusted scaffold company that we've worked with for over 10 years. Sam commented on how impressed he was with the scaffolders and how undisruptive they were. Under MCS, our project managers also sign up all of our clients to the HIP scheme, so that their deposits are insured if anything happens to the company prior to the installation. Following permission from the DNO and the completion of the technical and structural survey and various other project management tasks, it was time to get the system installed. A key part of preparing for Sam's installation was sending our head of installations around to do a technical and structural survey. Pretty much every installation, whether it be small domestic or large commercial, that Spirit Energy has done since the first install in 2010 has had a rigorous technical and structural survey from our head of installations, Justin. We've had loads of reviews that mention Justin's expertise and professionalism, and I'm yet to speak to any customers that aren't incredibly impressed with him and his work. A lot of installers will just turn up on the day and figure out the cable runs and kit locations then and there, but we just don't take that risk. All of our installations are done by our in-house team of installers that Justin has trained up himself. He's responsible for them all, and every time we don't get it right, he goes back to the site personally to fix the issue, even if it's at 9 PM on a Sunday. And believe me, Justin hates going back to site. The point of the tech survey is so that Justin can take a detailed look at the house and plan out the system to a very fine level of detail, as well as do a risk assessment for our health and safety so that our installers are safe on the day of the installation. He spends a lot of time in the loft measuring up the roof space to ensure that the layout will fit as intended. Now, we do take measurements earlier on when the salesperson does a survey, but he will often spot things that you need 15 years of experience actually installing solar and battery in order to spot. Justin also takes measurements as part of a structural survey. The measurements are then sent back to the project managers in the office, who prepare a full report which is then sent off to a third-party structural surveying company that we've worked with for a very long time, to guarantee that the roof is strong enough to take the weight of a solar system. A lot of installers don't do this, and I've had a few clients tell me that other installers have suggested they arrange a structural survey to be done if they want to have that level of security. We just don't like taking that risk with your roof. It's not just the weight of the panels, it's also the fact that if a strong wind gets under them, then they can rip the system off the roof. And obviously we want to make sure that that's not going to happen. Watch the earlier video on project management to learn more about the structural survey and what goes into it. Justin is a fully qualified electrician, and he'll also take a look at the wiring of your house, including the electrical bonding and earthing. In Sam's case, everything is straightforward because it's a modern house. However, you often get older systems that need bonding upgrades prior to fitting solar and battery. As Sam is getting a Powerwall 3 that is capable of full house power cut protection, it needs to be fitted with an earth rod. Occasionally, there's an existing earth rod on site, and Justin or one of our other electricians will check the earth fault loop impedance to make sure that the earth rod can be used and that we don't need to fit another one. In Sam's case, the only thing connected to the earth rod is an old style EV charging point. And the results of the earth fault loop impedance test showed that we could use the earth rod for the Powerwall 3. Justin also checks that the planned cable run and kit locations are suitable and optimal for the system. This is more relevant for ground mounts or large commercial systems, which can often have very long cable runs. And you do get serious voltage drops if the cables are suboptimally sized. Again, it's important to have someone with 15 years experience to look at the system in detail before installation, and to make sure that the kit locations and cable runs are planned optimally and that the installation will run smoothly and safely. Justin's technical survey is very important to ensuring that the job runs efficiently and making sure that everything goes to plan. Following the completion of all the project management tasks, as well as the DNO application and technical survey, it was time to actually install the system. The first step was to put the scaffolding up, which was done by a local scaffolding firm that we've worked with for over 10 years. The scaffolding went up very quickly and with minimal disruption. The scaffolders always take extra care not to damage the patio or the ground that the scaffolding is mounted on. And if there's a conservatory or any skylights below the scaffolding, then they'll also put up netting to make sure that if anything does fall, there's no risk to the house. Sam later commented on how impressed he was with the scaffolders. Following this, as I mentioned earlier on in the series, we decided to get a local trusted roofer to move the roof vents further up the roof so that we could fit 22 panels instead of 18. This did take a few hours, but ultimately it went very smoothly. A few days later, it was time for our in-house installers to come to site to fit the solar system. The first step was to measure up the roof to make sure that the system is perfectly in the middle and not skewed to one side, as that really wouldn't look very good. Following this, it was time to install the mounting brackets and the rails. As you may have seen in the project management video, the bracket layout, which you can see on screen now, is determined by software. And it's important to follow it so that the load is spread evenly throughout the system and there's no risk of the roof being damaged or the panels flying off it. The software worked out that Sam's solar system needs 50 brackets in order to be properly secure to the roof. After the brackets were installed in the correct layout, then the railings were fitted onto the brackets. The panels then slide onto the railings, as you'll see later on in the video. As any installer will tell you, slate roofs are tricky to work with, and it takes a lot of time to carefully lift the tiles without breaking any. You also have to cut slate tiles in order to fit the mounting brackets, which is very time consuming. Because you have to cut the tile, you also have to fit a piece of LED flashing under every bracket to ensure the water tightness of the roof. Because of all this, it took the best part of a day to fit all the brackets and rails. If this were a concrete tile roof with less fragile tiles, then it would have been a lot quicker and the whole solar panel installation would have probably been done in one day. The next day, after the brackets and railings were all fitted, it was time to lay the solar DC cables under the panels. It's important to keep the DC cables neat and tidy, so we clipped them to the rails that the panels slide onto. Once this was done, it was time to lift the panels to the roof and lay them on the railings. This wasn't the case for Sam's install, but for some large jobs with a high number of panels, we do have to be careful with the weight and loadings on the scaffolding. So sometimes have to only bring a few panels onto the scaffold at once and then fit them to the roof before bringing any more up. The panelling does take a while, as it's important to make sure that they're all straight and level, otherwise the whole array can look crooked. Finally, after the panels were fitted, it was time to fit the solar skirt bird protection. We offer two types of bird protection, bird mesh and a product called solar skirt. For Sam's system, he opted for the solar skirt, as it adds a very nice finish as well as keeping the birds out. We're very pleased with how this system turned out and think it looks really neat and complements the roof very well. A couple days after installing the solar, our electricians started work on fitting the Powerwall 3. Usually, both the solar and battery would be installed on the same day. However, because this was one of the first Powerwall 3 installations in the UK, our main shipment of Powerwall 3 units hadn't hit the docks in Southampton yet. So we got it put on a plane from America in time for the installation, which unfortunately didn't quite line up with the solar installation date. The day after the Powerwall 3 touched down at Heathrow, we sent two of our senior electricians, Simon and Matt, round to the house to start fitting it. The first step was to get the 6 solar DC strings from the loft space to the Powerwall 3 location by the garage door. In order to keep the cable run as neat as possible, we ran the DC strings out the side wall of the loft and down the side of the house in a white trunking to match the colour of the wall. Our installers take great pride in their work, as you can see by how neat Simon's DC cable run is. The DC cabling was then clipped along the brickwork at the bottom and fed into the garage wall. In this case, it was a 2-person job to get the cables through the loft wall neatly. But once the cables were through the wall, Matt went off to mount the Tesla gateway to the wall and start wiring it, which is a very big job that must be done properly by a fully trained electrician. Sam's Tesla gateway was installed next to the consume unit in the garage. The incoming electricity supply to the house is on the other side of that garage wall, so the cabling is all fairly straightforward and the gateway is in the optimal location. The gateway takes a while to install as there's a lot of wiring to do and it's quite complicated. In order for the Powerwall system to be able to keep the house running in a power cut, it has to be able to island the house from the grid. This involves running the mains power through the gateway so that the gateway can disconnect the house from the grid in a power cut. You also have to wire the consumer units that you want to be power cut protected into the gateway as well. On the tech survey, Justin will discuss if it's worth backing up any major loads at the property. For example, you usually wouldn't want your swimming pool to be running from the battery in a power cut. Some customers do want their EV chargers to run in a power cut, and in Sam's case we did put that on the backup side of the gateway. When the DC run was done, it was time to mount the Powerwall 3 so that Simon could work on the wiring for that while Matt finished off installing the gateway. For Powerwall 3, Tesla has created a dolly that makes it much easier to mount and maneuver the unit. It's very easy to use, you just lie the box down and put the dolly on top of it. The dolly has 2 arms which you then secure to the Powerwall before simply lifting it up and wheeling it over to where you're going to mount it. When the dolly is in position, you then use a standard power drill to operate the lifting mechanism and mount it on the wall bracket. Simon then started running the cables to the Powerwall 3. The cables that need to be run to the Powerwall 3 are an AC cable, which transfers power from the gateway to the Powerwall and vice versa, a communications cable so that the Powerwall and gateway can talk to each other, a LAN cable so that the system can access the internet, and finally the 6 solar DC cables from the roof. After the wiring for the Powerwall 3 and gateway was complete, it was time to commission the system. The commissioning process for the Powerwall 3 is very straightforward. It just involves the installer opening up the Tesla app and running through the setup. For Sam's install, this took about 20 minutes. There's a cool moment where the Powerwall 3 flashes red, which only happens during the system commissioning and never again following that. We commissioned the Powerwall 3 without the frosted glass pane on the front, just so that if there is anything wrong and the commissioning doesn't work, we can make changes very quickly. Part of the commissioning process is a power cut test, which is when the Powerwall switches into off-grid mode and the gateway cuts the main supply off from the grid. Finally, after commissioning the system, it was time to put the frosted glass pane onto the front of the Powerwall 3. Simon then ran through the system controls with Sam and showed him how to use the app and monitor the system. Following the completion of every install, we talked the client through how to use the system on site. We also prepare a comprehensive handover pack, which I'll go through in detail to show what you get from us to accompany the install. At the end of Sam's install, our electrician Simon paired his phone with the Powerwall and showed him how to use and monitor it. To start with, they did a power cut test, where Sam put the Powerwall into off-grid mode. It changed over instantly and lights didn't even flicker. In the Tesla app, you can change the amount of power that is reserved for a power cut. Tesla recommend 20%. However, Sam doesn't get very long power cuts, so he changed that to 10%. We also set up the storm watch feature so that Powerwall monitors local weather stations to see if a storm is on the horizon. If there is a storm, it'll anticipate a power cut and start charging up. In the app, Sam set the Powerwall mode to self-powered, which is set up to maximise solar generation use and reduce your reliance on the grid. The alternative to this is time-based control, which works with your smart tariff to maximise savings. Simon also showed Sam how to pair his Powerwall with the Octopus Flux tariff, which we worked out would be best for maximising his savings from the system. There's also a lot of monitoring that the Tesla app gives you, and Simon gave Sam a brief rundown of how the monitoring works and what you can look at in the app. In the first few days since Sam's installation was complete, he's been 96% off grid, which is exactly what he was looking for from the system. After we've left the site following installation, the final step is for the project manager to prepare a very comprehensive handover pack for the customer. A lot goes into the handover packs, and there are two main folders that get given to the client. The main part of the handover pack is a folder which includes the MCS certificate, the DNO commissioning confirmation, the electrical schematic, the HIP letter, the AC certificate, the building control notification, receipt of payment, and the structural survey report. It also includes a full handover manual with guides on how to use and maintain the system, as well as how to sign up to a smart tariff and troubleshoot any issues. Of course, we do also have a technical support department that is on hand to help if you have any questions or issues with the system at any point, whether it's in warranty or not. The second folder in the handover pack is full of all the datasheets and certificates for the main kit that has been installed. So for Sam's handover pack, there are datasheets for the GAA solar panels, as well as the Powerwall 3 and the generation meter. There is also a certificate for his 5-year warranty with Spirit Energy, where if anything goes wrong in the first 5 years, we will come out and fix it free of charge. Thank you for watching our detailed case study about the process of a residential solar and battery installation with Spirit Energy. We'd also like to say a huge thank you to Sam for allowing us to film and document the whole process. There's also a testimonial available from him if you'd like to have a look at that.